Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Subir.
Hello, I'm Dennis.
And today we'll be discussing the latest certification that is available in Google Partners, i.e. the Mobile Site Developers Certification. This program has been developed specifically to help agencies and customers understand the value of mobile sites and how they can better it for much better performance on the mobile traffic that you might already be getting today. So while today's content is focused mostly towards developers, if you're not a developer, you'll still be able to find lots of relevant information, particularly in the second half of the presentation. But if you're not a developer, what we would recommend is that you ask your developer team or your technical team to either go through this presentation or go through the Mobile Site Developers Certification Program, because it will really help in setting a certain discipline that is required today to make sure that your mobile sites are up to speed. To briefly talk about what the mobile site certification is, I think we at Google treat it as a yardstick for everyone to have a basic level of awareness of what really should go into your mobile websites today. Now, this, of course, incorporates aspects of mobile site speed. As we all know, speed is extremely important when it comes to mobile-focused users or smartphone-first users. Also to do with the user experience. So if your website loads fast, I think that's one part of the journey, but you need to make sure that the user experience matches up to the expectations of the customer. And also, we'll be discussing some of our more futuristic visions towards the mobile web, such as the progressive web apps and accelerated mobile pages, which we feel is going to be pretty cool for some of you to test out in the coming days. I have provided a short link over here. You can just copy it and open it probably in a different tab. This would give you quite a bit of information about the mobile site certification exam itself, what it entails, how to go about taking it, what the study guides are. So just make sure you take a note of this short link. Also, just a fair word of caution, we will be sharing quite a few case studies and resources through short links like these. So if you would have a pen and paper at hand, I think that will be helpful for you. So moving forward, why is taking a mobile site certification exam important for you or your developer team? Now, what we've already seen at Google is that mobile searches have started overtaking desktop in more than 10 countries, including the US and Japan. And in fact, in a lot of countries, the next generation of users of the internet are experiencing it for the first time on a mobile device. So if there was ever a period of time when mobile sites needed to be looked upon in a different lens, it's probably now. And when I talk about this data of mobile searches overtaking desktop, I'm talking about data that was 2 years back. So you can imagine within the last 2 years, with the smartphone revolution picking up pace as much as it has, how many more countries would have been coming into this fold as well. Not only that, what we also feel is that the certification exam places an immense amount of importance on specifically looking at mobile site speed. One of the reasons for that is that over the last few years, we've been doing tons of research around how mobile site speed affects performance for most of our advertisers and partners. What we found is that, and this is one of our latest researches that we did with Soasta, that every time we look at a website that loads in 1 second and the same website when it takes 3 seconds to load, the probability of bounce rate increases by 32%. And when the same website would take 5 seconds to load, the probability would increase by 90%. And as you can see from that point onwards, it only keeps on increasing. What this would probably help you understand is that if you're operating a website that sees a lot of mobile traffic, you should just be prepared to understand what the user expectation over here is. And what we would try to help you achieve is probably to enforce a discipline that all of your website pages should load within the first 5 seconds. Now, what we find is that in a lot of our researches, that more than 70% of the mobile websites out there are already taking more than 10 seconds to load. So the problem is widespread, but the user expectations has moved far beyond. You already see them interact with quite a few mobile websites that do match these standards. There are tons of companies like, even at Google, but even outside Google, like Amazon and Facebook. All of these companies tend to make sure that the users get that less than 5-second experience when they're coming onto the mobile site. In fact, I think Facebook also has something that they call as a 2G day, which means that they need to start operating on all of their properties or at 2G speeds and still make sure that the performance does not deter. So that is the kind of discipline that the industry is trying to set in this sense. And that is something that I think should be your prime takeaway from today, that you need to make sure that your websites would load in less than 5 seconds. And hopefully the certification exam over here will help you give the right tools and understanding and knowledge on how to do so. Very funnily, I think this was a nice analogy that was made to speed on mobile. Ericsson Labs actually did a stress level comparison to test how stressful people were when they were waiting for pages to load on their mobile phones. And what they found was that the stress caused by mobile delays was almost comparable to the stress that you would get while watching a horror movie. So if not anything else, I think just in the interest of the users coming to your platform, try not to stress them and make sure that they do have a mobile site speed that matches their expectations. So I understand that some of you may not already be a part of the Google Partners program or might have not signed up on the partners page. You need to do so in order to take the mobile site certification exam. So if either you will be taking it or you want someone from your company or from your technical team to take the exam, make sure that they're signed up on google.com/partners. All they need to do, it's a very simple sign-up process. Once they do that, they will be able to find a certification section where there will be mobile sites as a subsection as well, and over there you'll be able to find all the study guide. Bear in mind there's a high standard that we set for you to be able to pass this exam. The standard is at 80%, definitely much higher than my graduation marks. But what we want to make sure is that although this session will help you understand some of the core concepts, we would definitely recommend that you go through the study guide and prepare well before you take the exam. If you don't pass the exam, and I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, you can retake the exam in 7 days' time. So you would get much more time to prepare from that point onwards as well. This is the same short link that I shared a while back. So just take a note of it. You will be able to find all the information related to the mobile site certification through this short link. Just take a note of it. Now, moving forward, like I said, I am completely aware that some of you may not be developers. And for those of you who are not, I understand it might be a bit difficult to grasp some of the technical concepts that we're going to go towards. But if you want to do a quick study on the websites that you manage or the companies that you work with, we've just launched a revamped version of Test My Site. This was actually launched today, so you're probably going to be one of the first users on the platform if you use it. All you need to do is go to testmysite.thinkwithgoogle.com. You can enter the URL or the website that you work with and be able to get lots of information around how much time it's taking for your website to load, what is the estimated visitor loss, how are you comparing to the rest of the industry, lots of interesting information. Even for someone who's non-technical, you'll be able to get a lot of interesting information out of this. So please keep a note of this, testmysite.thinkwithgoogle.com. Even if you're not a developer, you'll be able to find tons of information that is non-technical, but will still help you in understanding how speed is important for your business. Moving forward to the agenda, I think the first half will be taken over by Dennis, who is our in-house mobile site specialist. And from that point onwards, he will be discussing, quite a few technical concepts around mobile site speed. And after that, we will be discussing aspects of user experience and some of the more future technologies that we're looking at. And there will be a small section on analytics as well. So if you're not a developer, just bear with us for the next, say, 20-25 minutes. And after that, we will be getting towards more non-technical aspects as well. So with that, I hand it over to Dennis, and he will be taking you through mobile site speed.
Thank you very much. Yeah. as Subir said, we're starting off with speed. So generally speaking, there are like two core principles of user experience, if you want to see it like this. So one is speed, and the other one would be design and functionality. And we tend to say that speed is like the core or the foundation for your user experience. So if you want to see it in an onion analogy, it's like the first peel. You have to get this one right. And if you're good on speed, you probably should focus more on design and functionality stuff. Yeah. So these are our benchmarks. Don't take them too seriously, but we get often asked like, what are good benchmarks for a mobile site? So there are three main parts we communicate. So the first one would be speed index, and I'm going to get a bit more into depth with speed index. But just for now, let's try and keep your speed index under 5,000. It's more or less what Subir said before. You want to have a loading time of like around 5 seconds. And we tend to measure that, and that would be also our recommendation for you to measure that in the connectivity of 3G, because there is quite a difference depending on what connectivity you use to measure your site speed. So yeah, you should have around 75 to 80 total requests for your whole mobile site, ideally. And the page weight shouldn't be more than 1 megabyte. So just keep these benchmarks in mind. Don't take them too seriously, but it's like a good orientation or starting point in terms of like what your mobile site might look like in terms of performance. So as I said, like getting a bit more into depth with speed index. What is speed index? Maybe you have heard of it, maybe not. It's more or less like the first metric you might want to look at in terms of measuring speed from a user perspective, because what it does, it gives you the average load time for the above the fold content, so the visible content for the user in milliseconds. So back to before, 5,000 would be around 5,000 seconds or 5,000 milliseconds. And we highly recommend to have this as your first metric to look at, because it measures the perceived speed from a user's perspective. You're probably familiar with other metrics like onload or DOM ready, which are not bad metrics by any means, but they are not necessarily measuring speed or perceived speed for the user. And this is where we would recommend focusing on first, because you want to make your user happy. You don't want to stress them out. You don't want to give them the horror movie experience. So that's why we would recommend to start with speed index, but it's always a good idea to combine it with other metrics like load time or start render. And then have like a good general overview of performance for your site. Yeah, so basic thing here, 5,000 would be a good value, or something under 5,000. And keep in mind, the lower the score, the better it is. Yeah. So why is perceived speed important? Let's put it in an analogy. Imagine if you're queuing up on a line and you don't see the end of the line and you don't see that it's moving. This is a very frustrating experience, right? So you don't have any expectations on how long this will take. So would you really line up here? Probably not. I probably wouldn't. And this is basically the same experience a user has when he comes to your site and he sees a lot of white screen before anything starts to render. So there's no expectation for him, like when will like stuff start to happen on my site or on this site. So after 5 seconds or after 3 seconds, a lot of people will bounce and just leave your site. So ideally, you want to start rendering very early and give the user an expectation, something is going to happen here. Yeah. So, and this is where the critical rendering path optimization comes into play, because the earlier you start rendering, the better for the user. So I think the very first important concept is you always should prioritize the above default content, because that's the visible part, that's what the user sees. So this is the important part.
Yeah, I think a lot of websites tend to make this mistake, right? That they tend to prioritize loading resources or images or text that is not seen when you load a website for the first time. So it will probably be once you scroll once or twice.
Exactly.
And what you should probably be focusing on is prioritizing on what comes up first on a mobile page, which is what the critical path would help you with. Yeah.
So ideally, you have probably one for your homepage, for example. You might have one big hero image. So try and optimize for this hero image. Try to load it as early as possible because it will take up a lot of your screen. And the user is seeing that something is happening here. And it's the same with like optimizing the critical rendering path. If you improve that, you will improve the speed index. You will improve the start render. And at the end, the experience for your user. And there are a few concepts to do that. It is not rocket science, but you should prioritize on them really, and you will see great improvement in your metrics and in your user experience, and at the end, your online revenue or your signups or whatever your homepage is doing. Exactly. So there are three main parts that are critical for the critical rendering path, which is number one, the number of critical resources. So try to eliminate all critical resources which are not really critical, which you don't need for the above the fold content. Have an eye on the critical path length and have an eye on the critical bytes. So this kind of ties back to the benchmarks we've seen before. So your total requests, like they're also the critical resources are part of your total requests, as well as the critical bytes, of course, are a part of your overall page weight. And if you focus on these three things, you should be able to really improve your users' experience and your start rendering. So just a quick overview. What is a critical resource? It's basically a resource that has the power to block your initial rendering. And I'm guessing you're all familiar with that if you're a developer that is. So usually we're talking about CSS and JavaScript here. But these are critical resources. So they stop your browser or your user's browser from painting, and therefore there is a lot of white screen as long as there is not every critical resource loaded and executed. The critical path length is a function of the dependency graph, which is not really like graphable, but so to put this more into context, ideally with your first GPC connection, you have 14 kilobyte, you can send. Ideally, all of these all of the critical resources that are needed for the above the fold content should be sent in that first request. So you don't have too many round trips. And the fewer critical bytes, the fewer content the browser has to download, and the faster it can start rendering. And this is a comparison of how the difference can look if you optimize for the above the fold content and for the critical resources. So as I said before, the goal is to start rendering as soon as possible. So, and you see the optimized progress rendering here starts at around 0.3 seconds. And this is where the user sees, okay, something is happening here. Maybe you start with a font, maybe you start with a hero image, get your value proposition out there, something like that. Whereas, and it is better to show some partial content and to get this feeling for the user. Whereas if you see a lot of widescreen, then all of a sudden you have most of the content, that would not be ideal. So we would recommend to start out with, show them something and give them the expectation of, okay, cool, something is happening here. So you might be asking yourself, how will I start to analyze and optimize my site? So this is our 4 steps process that we would recommend starting out. So first of all, you should analyze and characterize your critical path length. And this is the 3 critical parts. It's number of resources by its length. You could do that by, for example, using web page test. You might have heard of that tool before. Subir mentioned before Test My Site. We are also now partnering with web page test. It's webpagetest.org if you want to look it up. Or you could also use just Chrome DevTools. I'm guessing if you're a developer, you all are familiar with our Chrome DevTools. So this would be the first step to check your mobile site. Yeah, and then next part would be to minimize the number of critical resources, which is first of all, eliminate them. Are they really critical? If not, remove them. Another idea would be, are they critical for this, like for this site? Do I need my calendar JavaScript or my calendar CSS on this site? Do I even show the calendar here? Do I show it on my mobile site? If not, try to eliminate it. That's the easiest way. So the cheapest critical resource is the one not sent, we say. So this is the first part. If you need them, if they're critical for your above the fold content, we would recommend to defer their download. So meaning, yeah, basically for JavaScript, most of the times it's like putting it into the footer, defer it, or load them async. This is one of our go-to recommendations to speed up your speed index or your rendering of the above the fold content. Yeah, and second part, mark them as async. Third time is optimize the number of critical bytes. That's what I was referring to before, because you don't want to have too many round trips. Send all the critical resources in your first TPC connection. Yeah, and optimize the order in which the remaining critical resources are loaded. Yeah, download all critical assets as early as possible. This is the way, like you should start tackling optimizing your mobile site. Yeah, so just a quick look on the browser rendering process. So we have the document object model building, the HTML parsing, then we have the CSS, and then we have the JavaScript, then the CSS object model and the document object model build the render tree, and then the browser starts the layout and starts painting. And as I mentioned before, there are more or less 2 or 3 critical parts you want to focus on. And the first would be the CSS. As you probably know or might not know, CSS is render blocking because CSS cascading style sheets have to be loaded and executed because they can change the look and feel of your site. So the browser more or less has to know how it will look before it can start painting.
And I believe this is sometimes one of the more top recommendations when you run like a Test My Site report or a web page test report, that often the reports come up with either a CSS or JavaScript render blocking.
It is true, but it's also one of the recommendations to take a bit more effort on the development side because, touching its Java, your CSS, especially ideally, you would just load the critical CSS, so inline that and like put the rest into the footer. I know most developers don't really like this. It doesn't look really good. It's like that's the feedback we're getting. But you can also just start and loading your CSS asynchronously. We still give this recommendation because this is the main reason why we have it's the one render blocking resource next to JavaScript. So I know it's a bit of effort, but if you touch it, you will highly optimize your speed index and your time to first render. Said it before, same goes for JavaScript. I think it's a bit easier for JavaScript because most of the times you might be able to just defer your JavaScript, which is a bit easier. Still keep in mind, as I said before, for both resources, see if you really need them. We'll touching upon that a bit later, but especially for JavaScript, there's so much stuff people don't use on their mobile side or shouldn't use on their mobile side. So I think the best recommendation still is check if you really need it. This is like, we will touch on that, but like, main example here is like carousels and sliders on mobile. They're using a lot of JavaScript, and most of the time they are not really necessary and are not ideal in terms of user experience. So this is probably the second go-to recommendation we are giving. It's also like it shows up a lot on Test My Site. And this is probably easier than optimizing your CSS. So most of the time, it might be a bit easier in terms of development effort. So if you have a quick look, this is in green, you see the HTML parsing. And then in gray, you see the HTML parsing is paused because a script is downloaded and then needs to be executed. And at the top, you see how it would look like if you probably have your JavaScript in the header. So HTML starting, and then it needs to pause because the JavaScript needs to be downloaded and executed. What you can do is you can async your JavaScript, which then saves you a lot of time in terms of HTML parsing paused. Ideally, we would recommend to defer it. It depends a bit, like you should always defer it if your JavaScript is dependent upon each other, like if the execution time or is dependent upon each other, so then you should defer it. Otherwise, you can also async it. Generally speaking, we usually recommend to defer it if you can. Of course, you can only do that with JavaScript that is not necessary for the render or like for the look and feel of your above the fold content.
So basically, don't put it in the header unless you really need it.
Ideally, that would be the easiest way. Yeah, exactly. So check for JavaScript, you can defer, and this will save you a lot of time. Second part, and I think this is a very important and also a very easy way to optimize your site, because as we always say, images are expensive in terms of speed. So if you have the option, optimize your images. Because images often account for the majority of the downloaded bytes on a page. And the question is, do you really need all of these images? Again, as before with the JavaScript and the CSS, do you show all of the pictures on your mobile site, or do you maybe just hide them via CSS and not even showing them? So this is the worst case. Still, do you need all of them? Are your users really interacting with all of these pictures, or might it be a good idea to not show them on mobile? Because probably your users having like a different use case on mobile anyway. So maybe they're not scrolling through all the product pages there. Maybe it's more, whatever, depending on your site. But keep in mind, if your users might have another use case for your mobile site, do they need that much pictures? Maybe not, then get rid of some pictures. And the rest, ideally optimize for mobile. There's a few optimization best practices. They will also be part of the mobile certificate, so pay attention here. So one would be remove unnecessary image metadata. This is geo information, camera information, stuff like this. We would also recommend to prefer vector formats if you can. This one is also very important. Minify and compress SVG assets if you have them. Especially apply gzip. I mean, you should always apply gzip. This is also one of our go-to recommendations. I'm guessing most of you already have gzip activated. If not, please do. It is rather straightforward and will save you a lot of weight on your page. And for still images, you might want to prefer PNGs because they have better compression ratios. So this is like the first stuff you could do in terms of like optimizing your images.
And even if you're not a developer, I think this is a fairly easy practice to understand, because if there is more weight being added to your pages with images that are not necessary, chances are that a lot of developers, when they're creating a mobile site, they use the same image on desktop and on mobile. The desktop site can probably afford very heavy images, but the mobile site cannot. And often they forget to compress the images. It's as simple as just making a smaller file version of the image and uploading it to the mobile version.
So this can save you a lot of loading time, a lot of weight, and it's very easy to do. Whereas, as I said before, touching your CSS might be tricky, whereas optimizing images, if you have room to optimize them, this is very straightforward and very easy. You should definitely do that. We touched upon this already, but this is a tricky topic for us. So we would recommend not using carousels on mobile. I know the headline is a bit controversial here. So first thing, check if you measure your carousels. A lot of the times we ask our customers, do you measure your carousels? Do you know how people interact with the second, third, and fourth slide? And we get the answer no. If you don't, you might want to just start measuring it and see if it has any positive impact on your click-through rates and on your conversions. If it has not, keep in mind you're trading basically site speed and speed index and performance for pictures. And if people are not interacting with them and maybe not even seeing them, that's not a good trade-off, is it? So yeah. As you can see on the slide, it is a speed killer, mainly because it uses JavaScript, and it needs to be JavaScript that sits in the head most of the time, and you're loading a lot of pictures, and you're loading them at the same time. And from a user experience perspective, there's also a few reasons why you shouldn't do it, especially on mobile. It is very slow. Moving is not ideal. So there's this thing we call banner blindness. So people confuse moving objects with ads. And then therefore just don't look at them because they think it's ads and banners. We don't need that. Movement while reading is never ideal. So just imagine you're sitting next to someone who is reading. If you have ever experienced that, you probably don't read at the same speed. So it's very hard to get the speed right in terms of moving. Like people read in very different ways, and the speed is very different. And usually what we see, the first slide will get all of the views and clicks. So there's not a good reason to show more slides on this page. And especially on mobile, people are used to scrolling. That's what they do. That's what we know from most popular apps, may it be the Google search, may it be Facebook or Instagram. We are used to scroll on mobile. We generally don't really swipe. We are scrolling. And this is I mentioned this before, this is the second problem. You're loading a lot of pictures depending on how many slides you have. You're loading them at the same time, which saturates your bandwidth or your user's bandwidth, which even slows your site down even more.
Not to mention it just adds so many more images that you need to download anyway.
Yeah. And if you measure it or don't, then measure it. And if you measure it and see people don't interact with it, get rid of it. Not really necessary, I guess. Just to show you a few examples, there are many more, but a lot of the smaller and bigger retailers now went to a no slider, no carousel policy, at least on mobile. A few of them also using adaptive design, meaning they're still using it on desktop, but sending out another mobile template for mobile users. But we have Nike, Target, Samsung. They got rid of their. Amazon is also a very good example. They all got rid of their sliders on mobile. Because it really affects your speed index. If you want to be really quick, just get one static image, a nice hero image, use a value proposition there, maybe even base64 encode your hero image, inline it in the HTML, and it will be there super quick. And most of the times what we're seeing, you benefit more from the speed, from the decreased bounce rate, and from the increased conversion rate coming from the decreased bounce rate than you would, profit from several slides.
And I think that this often becomes a key point of discussion between developers and marketing professionals within the same company, because I feel marketers have a lot of love for carousels. Of course, I can see the creativity in it. And developers tend to prefer performance a bit more. So my advice to you would be is that if you're a marketer and you're very sure that the carousel works for you, I would advise you to at least test using a static image and compare the performance difference. From what we have seen, most websites tend to do better if they have a static image that can help the website load a lot faster.
Yeah, I had a few customers who basically cut their speed index in half just by removing their sliders. Right. I haven't put them in ever since, so it is worth just trying out. I'm guessing if you're a developer and you have to convince someone, maybe show them some of our best-in-class examples or a good site you like, which loads fast and don't uses sliders, maybe from your vertical. This is what we're trying to do to convince marketers as well, so this could work. And this is just some stats you can find on how are people interacting with slides. So Just very briefly, basically, it's decreasing in a power curve. So every click, not really dependent upon how you build your carousel. Of course, there are better ways in terms of design, to build a carousel, depending on if you have to swipe, if you use arrows or thumbnails. And there are a bit of differences here. But basically, for every design, you see it is decreasing. The more slides you put in, the more the interaction with the slides are decreasing, and the more your speed index is very likely to increase. So maybe if you have to have a carousel, try to optimize it in terms of performance, and really think hard about how many slides do you really need. At least maybe just use 2 or 3. This might be enough, because up to slide 8, chances are very high no one will ever interact with the slide or even see it. So,
right. And I think because a lot of our viewers might also have like a team that works on AdWords, they would have complete control over what kind of keyword behavior is leading a certain user to the web page. And they could easily customize the landing page according to the keyword intent. So for example, if I'm on a shopping website and I've arrived on the website after looking for shoes, then I can have a static image for a shoe. Or if I come in looking for a jacket, the static image can be a jacket. So you can always customize your, I guess, the landing pages according to the keyword intent as well.
Another thing we get, maybe some of you are even selling that ad space. So this is a pushback we sometimes get from customers. Yeah, but we're selling this ad space to other companies, and we need that space. Maybe you don't need a slider, but like use 2 static images and put them above each other, and then still have 2 messages, maybe 3, depending a bit on the size. But there are different design techniques you can use and different templates you can use. You don't necessarily need this slider. Then you still have the pictures, but at least you can get rid of the JavaScript. So maybe keep that in mind if you need more advertisement space, more space for messages. Think about creative ways of how you could do it without using at least JavaScript. Next part is our web font optimization. This is another thing where you can really save loading time. So if you want to use web fonts, and I know a lot of people do because it's critical for brand and for your CI, there are a few techniques you should keep in mind to optimize those web font resources, because they also can be render blocking and they can be quite large in terms of file size. So a few things you want to keep in mind. First of all, audit and monitor your font use, meaning do you need all characters and all variants of this font? Most of the time, you probably don't. Classic example that we see a lot is like people use Font Awesome, which is a library of icons, and they download the whole library, but just using, I don't know, 10% of the icons. So it's very easy to customize, to not load the whole library, but just the icons you need. You can save a lot of bytes there. This is very straightforward. Just check for it. This is probably true for all font versions. So
And I believe this isn't even a huge sacrifice in terms of the UI, right? Or I mean, if you're able to monitor what kind of fonts you're using, I think that's a very, very small price to pay. If you can get huge improvements in speed.
Definitely. Then deliver optimized font formats to each browser. Maybe another tip, maybe you know the site Can I Use? It's one word, caniuse.com, where you can easily check which format is supported by which browser. And then maybe have a look at what kind of browsers are people using to visit my site, and see that you have, for every browser, an optimized date format of your font. And also keep in mind gzip compression, again, for especially EOT and TTF is critical here. And the other one would be to use a long-lived max age timestamp and a revalidation token for efficient use between sites. These are the 3 go-to tips you should really have an eye on to optimize fonts. And there's a lot of more stuff you can do, which is is getting a bit more into the weeds. This is you should do when you're around 5 seconds. Maybe you want to cut down to 3 seconds. Then you want to look at the bit more advanced stuff. And for this, we have a series called Mobile Speed Hackathon on Air. And two of my colleagues did one on font optimization. Really cool stuff. It's mainly for developers, but giving you a lot of tips, whether you want to use system fonts or web fonts, what you can do if you want to use web fonts, stuff like cross-site caching, etc. So really, really cool stuff. I might just give you a second here if you want to take notes on the...
Just take note of the short link.
Exactly, and this will lead you to the YouTube video. And again, if you're not a developer, maybe your developers just send it like a marketer and just send it over to your developers. They might be interested. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
You can always pause the video as well if you want to note it down. So we'll give you another second.
That's true. And this is another advertisement for our series here. This is the next Hackathon on Air, which we would highly recommend to join. Next one is about preload, prefetch, and priorities for the mobile web. Great title. So another same two colleagues will do a hackathon on Air on the kind of like this hackathon, a bit more into the weeds even, probably a bit more technical, but it's good stuff where you can really start tweaking and fine-tuning your mobile site. So
yeah, I would definitely recommend that you sign up for the live stream.
Yeah.
We do it, say, once a month. And we go really deep into some topics of mobile site speed and mobile site development. Even if you're not a developer yourself, I would definitely recommend that have your technical team sign up for this. We tend to have really nice, small, intimate discussions over live chats as well. So often some of the questions that you might have, you will have an opportunity to talk to a specialist dedicated for an hour who will be able to help you on these fronts. All you need to do is just go to this short link. Again, it's case sensitive, so just sign up on the short link and we will be sending you more information via email.
Yeah, and even if you're not a developer, they're also covering different topics which are more into the UX direction. So your designers, UX designers might be interested as well. So I think the last one was on checkout funnel optimization. So we cover a lot of topics there, and we'll give you a heads up on what's going to be before, or with the invitation, so you can just see if it's interesting for you or not.
And the mobile site certification, I think, is like step one, just so that you have all your basics in check in terms of understanding what goes into appropriate mobile site development. And this is something that will help us, revisit those concepts in a more practical nature, in a more in-depth nature. So it's a great follow-up to have after you've completed your mobile site certification. Cool. So,
hand over back to you.
Speaking of user experience, I guess we're at that section. Again, user experience is something that is absolutely critical. I think mobile site speed is very important, but when that fast speed leads you to a website, the kind of experience that you get over there is equally imperative in terms of making sure how the users engage with your website. Now, we did quite a bit of research to really understand what makes up for the DNA of great user experience. And what we came up with was a list of 25 design principles. You can just search for 25 design principles by Google for mobile sites, and you'll be able to find all of this information come up. But if you were to really look at it in terms of broad categories, the more important ones are homepage and site navigation. How easily can you move between pages on the website on your mobile phone? How relevant is your site search? I think that is, again, another area that a lot of people tend to miss out on. The ability to convert. As you might know, a mobile user might have very different conversion behavior than a desktop user would. So is the website really making sure that it's easy for a user to just start and end a conversion on the mobile device itself? A lot of times what we find is that it isn't. Also for form entry, I believe if you are in an e-commerce or you're managing an e-commerce business or a website, chances are that you do have certain amounts of forms that need to be filled. But as we all know, filling forms is not the most pleasant thing you want to do on your mobile phone, especially because it's a small screen and you need to type out a lot of details. We often find that most checkout processes have about 25 form fields. And if you have stubby fingers like I do, that can be a really tedious process. Moving on to usability and form factor, that's essentially making sure that all of your website pages are interactive, they are responsive, you don't need to pinch and zoom, you can move between pages easily, the images come up without being pixelated. So essentially it's looking at more of the hygiene factor when it comes to your mobile site experience. I won't go into each and every one of these. I would definitely recommend that you go through our exam study guide. It goes into vast depth in terms of discussing all of these aspects. Some of the key ones that I feel are important for you to take away today, and even in the context of the mobile site certification, some of the more important UX principles, I think, firstly relate to the ability to convert. As you can imagine, people can prefer not to convert or not to finish a purchase on the mobile phone if things become too cumbersome for them, but it should be easier for them to pick off where they left off from. So one of the lowest hanging fruits in that sense is just the ability for someone to look at a product and be able to save it as an email for themselves, or share it back to themselves via Facebook post or WhatsApp message or whatever be the choice of interaction. But just the ability to be able to go back to the page on a different device where they left off from on their mobile phones. Most of you might be traveling to work and be maybe scrolling through different products, but chances are you would have to go through all of that searching again on a different device. But by just implementing something that will make it easier for users to share, actually helps making sure that they come back to the websites from the exact point where they left off from. Another easy takeaway is, often what we find is that a lot of businesses need or mandate users to fill in a login information before they can purchase. And what we find is that often it discourages users, especially because mobile users don't like filling out a lot of forms. So just have the option for someone to check out as a guest. Probably what you would need is an email ID, and maybe you can send a follow-up email for them to register with the website if logging in or having users logged in is that important. But if it is creating a barrier or friction between the end purchase goal, chances are that you should offer a guest option and not just mandate logging in as a signed-in user. Another low-hanging fruit is just the forms. Like I said, filling out forms is not the most pleasant experience anyway. But what we often find is that while you're filling out forms, there are certain sections that may not require the long form, the QWERTY form of the keypad. It just requires the numpad, for example, your cell phone number, your postal codes, things like that. And what might be much more easy for your user to fill out is just type in through a numpad rather than the longer version. It's a very, very small and easy recommendation, but something that goes a long way in making sure that you're reducing the friction in the form fields and the checkout process. Another thing that in the form situation that a lot of developers tend to miss out on is real-time validation. So say today, if you're trying to fill out a form with about 5 fields, chances are that you might have a typo or might have inputted the wrong format in a certain form entry. But if that is not told to you at that very instance, chances are that you would have filled out the entire form and then hit the submit page, and then the website will tell you that, hey, here are the sections you didn't fill out properly, and then you would have to go back and fill it all over again. But what real-time validation would be able to do for you is exactly highlight as you're filling in if that is the right format or not. Again, something really simple, but can go a long way in helping that process.
Yeah, I think this, you can relate to that. This is just frustrating if you have to scroll back up. It's like, where's the error now?
Yeah. And trying to figure out where you exactly went wrong if the website doesn't tell you that either. Autofill functionalities also tend to help a lot. So if you don't have autofill enabled for your mobile websites, try to have that ready. If a user has entered sets of information on another website before, chances are that the browser has stored it and they can just pull back all of that information so that they have lesser number of fields to fill in general. Cool. So like I said, the user experience side, I'm just discussing a few aspects. Please do go through the mobile site certification study guide, and that should tell you a lot more on this subject as well. I quickly wanted to touch on some of the more or some of the other important topics within the context of the certification exam. A few of you may not know about these, so I just wanted to give a brief introduction during this session. One of the topics is accelerated mobile pages, and this is an open source initiative that Google undertook with developers around the world to really make sure that most of the static content that's out there on the web can be optimized for speed very, very easily. And what we did was that we looked at mobile web pages that were existing and what were the common components within these web pages that were A, either not needed, or B, could have been optimized to an extent that the speeds that we would get would be probably around less than 1 second. What we did at the beginning of this AMP initiative was really to partner with a lot of newspaper websites. As you can imagine, news articles mostly just have static content, so basically images and text. So without a lot of functionality needed, it becomes easier for optimize, and that's where AMP really started off. But what accelerated mobile pages over a period of time has been able to do is also broaden its reach. And now we see increasingly a lot of even e-commerce players that are coming in and using AMP. eBay is one of the biggest partners on this project as well. I think they announced this year that they have more than 15 million accelerated mobile pages that are running live. So something that is gaining a lot of traction, especially when we're talking about speed. And this is where we see a lot of our future efforts also going towards. So this is something that you should definitely keep in mind, or even take out the time to speak to your developers about, or if you yourself are a developer, you should definitely read up more about this. The study guide gives you a brief introduction on it, a brief level of awareness, but there are other code labs that are available that can help you build upon this knowledge of our accelerated mobile pages as well. How it basically works is that, as Dennis was talking earlier, there are a lot of different aspects within websites that we see that slows them down, especially it may be something to do with the HTML or even the JavaScript. So what AMP tends to do is it tends to restrict developers a bit in terms of what they can really do with the web page in terms of JavaScript and HTML use. And that helps us in achieving a certain amount of discipline that websites can load within a certain amount of time. And the AMP cache network really helps in speeding up the delivery of that content. What we find is that a lot of websites that have static content, such as newspaper or news article websites, are great cases to use AMPs for. But also, if you have a website that is relatively simplistic, say it's just a lead gen website, so all you need to do is have someone fill out a form to get a quote, or have someone go to the website, look at the services, and make a call, then an AMP can be really helpful for you as well. And of course, we're seeing more and more verticals pick this up. But I think if you're in one of these two categories of businesses, this is something that you can almost use immediately for speeding up your business. Yep. And for those of you who are also involved in the digital marketing side of things, what we're seeing is that AMP is also getting great results just by being used as an AdWords landing page as well. You can go ahead and read this case study. All you need to do is search for Think with Google space Monetti. Monetti is the name of the company that used AMP as an AdWords landing page. And what they found was that their mobile conversion rates almost increased by 28% just by making sure that the AdWords traffic or the paid marketing traffic was going towards an accelerated mobile page. And this just goes on to tell you how just by improving something that is as hygienic or as basic as speed can lead to performance improvements for your website. So they didn't do anything very, very special. All they did was make sure that the website was loading faster, and that's what led to good results for them.
I think this would also be one of our go-to recommendations. Look at your entry pages, where you get a lot of entry visits from probably a lot of new users as well. Try to prioritize them to optimize for speed. So this is probably your AdWords landing pages and other entry pages. Because there you gain a lot if you open up the funnel. You have a lower bounce rate, and then you will see that in conversion rates. So in terms of prioritization, we would recommend starting with that.
And this doesn't help you only in the context of AdWords, although over here they did use it as an AdWords landing page. But if you're doing any paid marketing that leads users to your website, you should make sure that the website loads fast, right? It helps you in getting better returns out of any sort of marketing that you're doing, especially if you're paying someone to get users onto the website. Just make sure that that money is worth investing and goes towards the right kind of experience delivering mechanism. Moving on, another technology that we're really excited about is progressive web apps. And what progressive web apps tend to do is really bridge the gap between the user experience and the capabilities of the apps and transfer it all the way over to the mobile websites. So a lot of the features which you would traditionally only get on apps could now be available on your mobile websites as well by using progressive web apps. The mobile site exams study guide gives you a brief introduction, but like I said, like AMP, we have a lot of code labs out there. So if you're interested in this, you will be able to get more information on it. But essentially what a progressive web app tends to do is that there is no hard and fast definition of a progressive web app, but it is a collection of features. So it has features like instant loading. What we see is that every subsequent load that happens on most progressive web apps happen in less than 1 second. So you're really blowing away that target of 5 seconds. If you're using something like an AMP or a PWA, you're really looking at load times of less than a second. A progressive web app also allows you to add the website to your home screen as an icon. It allows you to send push notifications. It's fast and responsive. So a lot of it also includes an app-like user experience. So a lot of the things that you could previously not do on a mobile website, but only could do on an app, it's now available to you through the course of progressive web apps. A few of the functionalities that I mentioned, like instant loading and adding to home screen or sending push notifications, the secret sauce behind all of that is service workers. And you can read more about it in the study guide, like I said, but essentially a service worker is a client-side proxy that is written in JavaScript. And that really is the technology behind what makes the load times on progressive web apps a lot more faster. Some of the cool functionalities I wanted to bring up with progressive web apps. For example, this is the PWA that Air Berlin created. And as you can see, as soon as a user would have, say, booked a flight on Air Berlin, they would see an option where they could add the Air Berlin website to their home screen as an icon. And this is what usually happens in an app, but not on a website. But just by adding it as an icon, now you see that it's very easy for you to go back to. So just one tap on that app icon, and you're back into the same page where you left off from. And for those of you who remember the Windows 98 days, it's exactly in the spirit of like creating a shortcut for your website that you can access through your home screen. And that's exactly what it is in its spirit. Also, push notifications are another major feature. So just like you get the option to add something to your home screen, you also get the option of adding push notifications from your website. So if the users accept it, you can send push notifications to them. This is, again, something that apps tend to do a lot, but mobile websites don't. But now through PWAs, you get this sort of incremental functionality that can really help in reconnecting the user back to the website over a period of time. So that was like a brief overview of PWAs, and I know on paper it seems like AMP and PWAs are two very different concepts, but what we're noticing is that a lot of cutting-edge mobile websites today are using both these technologies. Now, I would definitely recommend that when you have the time, just go to YouTube and search for Vigo PWA. What they've done is they've actually combined the AMP and the PWA experience. I believe it's probably one of the more cutting edge mobile web experiences out there. Definitely go through this case study. It has a lot of interesting information for you if you're interested in knowing what can be an ambitious goal or an aspirational goal for your mobile website. With that, I think we have a quick section on testing and measuring. In the interest of time, we'll try to wrap it up a bit quickly. But Dennis, if you could just run through a quick few measurement recommendations.
Yeah, we'll try to focus on the important stuff for the certificate.
Yeah.
I think we already touched upon a few of these recommendations. So in terms of your tracking, may it be Google Analytics or whatever tracking tool you use. For UX improvements, we would recommend focusing on landing pages, as we said before. Focus on the pages where you get a lot of traffic, especially a lot of entry traffic, maybe entry traffic you pay for, because that's where you get the best return on invest. Second one, and this also ties back to the checkout optimization Subir mentioned before, analyze your checkout behavior. So use the checkout behavior analysis report in Google Analytics. Have a look there and see where you lose people. Would you expect to drop people, like to lose people there because the checkout process is done? If not, try to focus on these pages and optimize them, maybe by having user tests, by looking at your analytics, or just by trying out yourself. And check the devices usage, which also is like check your operating systems. Ties back to before, you want to optimize for the most used browsers of your users, because there might be a lot of differences. Again, maybe check caniuse.com for certain technologies that are supported or are not supported by special browsers. Exactly. So another one would be, maybe you don't have a Google Analytics account, but you still want to prep for the certificate. You might want to have a look at our demo account. It's tied to our Google Merchandise account, where you have like most of the functionalities you would have in a very well set up Google Analytics account. Not admin rights, of course, that is, but you don't need that for the certificate or for most of the functions. So yeah, if you don't have your own Google Analytics account, or maybe it's not that well set up, you can always go there and have a look at the reports we just mentioned, if it's just for prepping for the exam, or if you're interested in analytics anyway. Definitely would recommend to have a look here. Yeah, and maybe a last word on A/B testing. We mentioned that before. This is always a good option if you want to try something out without putting too much effort in it, especially if it's being like testing a carousel versus a static image. That is very straightforward. You might want to use an A/B or ABN test, which is a randomized experiment using 2 or more variants of the same web page. Usually A is the original and B would be the variant of the tested one. So very simple example would be you test like a picture A against a picture B, or maybe a call to action in blue against a call to action in red. And that's also what we would recommend if you want to start with A/B testing. Start with simple experiments. Start with A and B experiments. You should probably run them around 30 days, depending on how much conversions you have, to have like a statistical significant proportion. But that's a good way also if you want to convince somebody that something is not working out. Just show them in an experiment. It's most of the time even easier than showing them the numbers, because on numbers you always get arguments. If you just have solid conversion experiences here and you see, okay, we are getting a lot of more conversions with variant B, it's easy to convince people.
So yeah, with that, we're coming to a wrap on the session. I think we're slightly over time, but hopefully the topics that we discussed were helpful for you. Again, just remember to take the mobile certification exam. All you need to do is just sign up at google.com/partners. And it's pretty intuitive for you to find out how you can take the exam and how you can prepare for it. We would definitely recommend that you make sure that your developers do go through the study guide and make sure that all of these recommendations that we have are actually implemented and help you in bettering the performance of your website. But with that, we would like to just say good luck with the exam. We hope all of you who've attended either pass or have your technical teams pass the exam. I think we'll take a quick look at if there were some questions coming in during the course of our discussions. As I said, we're probably a bit over time, but for most of your questions, I believe the answers would already be there. I think we have a question from Gabriel. Is it better to build a site for mobile first or create one for desktop and one for mobile separately? I don't think there's a hard and fast rule here, is there?
No, it's like the consultant answer. It depends. It depends a bit on the context and on your strategy, on what you want to do with your mobile site. In general, I think it's might be less development effort if you have a responsive site versus an adaptive approach. But keep in mind, you also with a responsive approach, you need to optimize towards your mobile experience. So this is a bit of the, I would say, responsive curse. People started building out responsive sites and then just said, okay, we just have to maintain this one site and we don't really have to do something because it's responsive. And this is where you see too big pictures, images being loaded on mobile, stuff just being hidden on mobile but still loaded. So I think both is good, depending on what you feel more comfortable with. But keep in mind, also for a responsive site, you need to put some development effort and strategic approach to it.
Yeah, it really depends on what really suits your business more, I guess. There's no hard and fast rule about it. Our recommendation is that whichever way you go, just make sure that the site loads in less than 5 seconds. Yeah. As long as you can maintain that, I think both versions should work fine. We have a couple of questions on AMP, which will be the last one that we'll take. I think Hema and Sadhana both had a question on, is AMP useful for their clients or useful for a homepage? Definitely, especially if your homepage has a lot of static content and images on it. I think it's really helpful if you can have an AMP page. Just keep in mind, AMP has a different version of analytics. So it has certain metrics that you cannot track as effectively as on standard mobile pages. But definitely, like we said, take the A/B experiments as a theme to go forward. Do test out a technology like AMP. It's certainly been a very, very helpful for a lot of the clients that we've worked with already. And again, like I said, it's an open source initiative. So if you feel that there's something about the AMP technology that you feel is not working specifically for your use case, we have a huge GitHub resource that's going on. You can always feed in what you really require specifically out of AMP for your website. And chances are that our engineers will be able to work on it and really make sure that the experience meets the expectation of the users. With that, we're really over time now, but thanks a lot for joining in today. And I hope you had an informational session. And please make sure that you do take the mobile site certification exam, or at least have your technical team take that. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.